Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. We've all heard of and laughed at people who think that D&D is a game that you can win. You know, the kind of person who thinks that if they can just pull a fast one over the DM and the rest of the party, Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad, peace be upon him, will descend from the sky and give them a high five and some orange slices or something. But of course, experience tells us that that's not true. It's gonna sound dumb saying this unironically, but the real prize that we get from D&D is the friends that we make along the way. However, just like any prize awarded after taking a W, the prize for playing D&D can easily be taken away if it's discovered that you were being a scumbag in order to win it. The story I have for you today stars a player who was so obsessed with the concept of being the top dog of his RPG group that he resorts to committing unforgivable crimes, such as abusing overpowered homebrew, murder hoboing, and being a furry. The guy was so insufferable that I'm convinced that he was trying to speedrun the destruction of his social life, and you know what? I gotta respect that Sigma grind. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of R/RPG-Horrorstories. Enjoy. This week's story comes from Reddit user Judith VI and is titled Story of a Player Winning D&D but Losing All of His Friends. I've been listening to a lot of horror stories narrated by Crispy's Tavern. Sorry, OP, wrong channel. So I've decided to share mine. I need to clarify that English is not my first language, so sorry in advance. It's not a big epic tale, but rather a compilation of small ones. The protagonist is a rogue. Just rogue because he played one in multiple campaigns. I'll start with little things that could have been hand-waved if they had occurred on their own. 1. Rogue always asked for kinda overpowered homebrew races and abilities while everyone else was strictly using official materials. One DM gave up because Rogue was his close friend. That would be important later. So he had some cool innate spellcasting on top of a climb speed as well as general speed boosts and other things I can't recall. 2. He described his characters as chaotic good, but would sometimes kill an important NPC or be quite cruel out of the blue. He would always bring up ye old, "it's what my character would do," and stated he has his own view on alignment that we couldn't understand and could not argue with. Number 3. Occasionally, he would take great offense at someone not endorsing his tastes and views on life. Mainly the fact that none of us were furries like him. Or one time he said that I wasn't beaten hard enough as a child and sometimes physical abuse is the only way to make children behave. Yikes. 4. Rogue played the same character all the time. Not just the same class or race, it was basically the same character roleplay-wise, albeit with a different name. 5. He took pride in not reading the PHB and bragged about it several times, about how it didn't prevent him from being the best player. So where do I even start? I was invited to a D&D 5e game by a friend. It had a rocky start, but eventually we had a stable group, which the rogue was a part of. His character was a middle-aged man turned into a little furry girl. Oh god, it's gonna be one of those stories, huh? Well, me, here we go. His character was a middle-aged man turned into a little furry girl by a mage as an experiment, though we didn't know the details at the time. He would often jump from her being really naive and innocent to knowing adult stuff, which was pretty jarring. His character annoyed me, cause she felt really out of touch with the tone of the campaign. But I learned to take it a bit easier. We all had our goofs. He seemed to be under the impression that team play was overrated and the goal was to win the game by himself. So he often ran off alone, would speak for the whole party without communicating with any of us, and would be bored by diplomacy being used instead of fighting. As we all know, slashing things with daggers is the main point of the game, right? He had a few small arguments here and there with other players, but mostly with me. I can be quite short-tempered, and so can he. Sometimes one other player would complain about Rogue's behavior to me because they thought that the DM wouldn't help them. You know, because he's the Rogue's best friend and all. And all their concerns were correct. If the DM talking to the rogue ever did prevent conflict, the effect never lasted. And for some reason, inexperience or lack of other friends to play with, I guess, all of us held on to the game. We argued frequently, and we hated each other at times, but overall, I gotta say, I still enjoyed the game. We even had some pleasant roleplay moments with the rogue. That's also why leaving seemingly wasn't on the table. We always had thought that the troubled times were behind us. On top of that, the player bullied the most by the rogue was also his close friend and didn't want to upset him. The last straw, or so I thought, was quite petty, but it didn't seem so in the moment. Rogue asked for a private session without anyone knowing, and he got one. I spotted this session by chance, seeing people in the voice channel thinking that they were just chatting or playing some game. Boy, was I wrong. The rogue had stolen several boxes filled with gems and jewels that was taken from the locals. The last session ended on us figuring out what to do with them, I think. So yeah, great stuff. I've messaged other players telling them what was going on, and all of us were not happy with both the rogue and the DM. But mostly rogue because everyone just felt pity for the DM. Like, I know it sounds strange, but we knew that their friendship was toxic, and the DM was outright being psychologically abused by this guy. It's far more complicated than that, but we allowed a lot of things to slide on DM's side while resenting the rogue, and often talking behind his back. I gotta say, there are no heroes in this story. We all kinda contributed to what happened. So what came of this endeavor? The rogue got roughly 40,000 gold, while others barely had like 1,000 between them. And the DM didn't want to retcon anything. The rogue even bragged about the items he got, and how his HP was now higher than mine despite me being a tank. Funny ha-has, I know. He also bought a magic ring, which he adored and always emphasized how he was kissing it while in battle. One player suggested that we steal the ring for a session or two. I can't say that was fair or helpful, but we thought it would be entertaining at least. And it was. Though the rogue was metagaming a lot by reading the DM's notes and personal texts. Yikes. So he immediately knew that it was us who stole the ring, and he was fuming. We all break into a big argument, and finally, he left. We had been asking the DM to kick him for a long time at this point, and it finally happened. Hooray, I'd say, if not for the fact that he returned after like 1 or 2 blissful sessions. The DM's response: guys, you're really passive without him. You need someone leading the way. We had a break from battles and were enjoying ourselves role-playing amongst one another, discussing personal stuff, dreams, love, backstories. Honestly, it was a highlight of the campaign for me. He played with us for some time, but we ignored him hard unless there were no other options. Like when he killed a plot-relevant NPC that others were really attached to, even after a revelation about them being a traitor. Cause we still kinda respected them and wanted to at least pull some information out. He just said that he was gonna kill him. We tried to stop him to defend the NPC, but we failed in our checks. We argued again for hours on end after the session, and he left again eventually. The DM tried to make the moment feel sweet and impactful, describing the parting, but we were having none of it. We sighed in relief, and that was that, for this campaign at least. It continued smoothly and ended great. The rogue pressed the DM to start this campaign again just for him and his other friends, though, and the DM obliged. Twice. None of them lasted longer than 3 sessions as far as I know. Shockingly, nobody wanted to play with the rogue and, unlike us, had the guts to leave themselves. Yup, yeah, I don't trust it. Normally when it's brought up that someone is a furry in one of these stories, it's only a matter of time before the sex pest shenanigans start popping up, and we've already seen the character that this guy is playing. Like I've said plenty of times at this point, despite not being a furry or I guess a scaly myself, I got no problem with furries doing their own thing, but goddamn, some of y'all make that stance a hard one to take. So enough whining about me, let's go ahead and move on to the story itself, shall we? So, something that I noticed here is that the DM found themselves worrying that the party was too passive. Which, to be fair, can be somewhat discouraging to a DM who spent all this time creating a world explicitly for their players to interact with. The knee-jerk reaction is usually, "Oh man, they think I'm boring, I'm a terrible DM!" But in reality, players will often explore this imaginary world at their own pace. Like OP said, what the DM interpreted as them being passive was actually a pretty standout part of the campaign for the players. When in doubt, it's not a terrible idea to bring the most important parts of your world to the players. Maybe the BBEG rolls up to the village the PCs are just vibing in, and hits them with the classic "I like your cut, G," and then smacks them around a little bit before taunting them and leaving to continue on their merry way. Congratulations! You have made it the personal ambition of every party member to go dunk on the guy who stole their lunch money. But let's not kid ourselves. This DM is totally owned by the rogue, and I sincerely doubt that they actually cared about the passivity of their party. No, the reality is that the DM probably cares a lot more about the rogue holding a grudge, and let me tell you, these people tend to hold on to bad blood like a pit bull with a newborn. And no, you still can't call animal control on furries, trust me, I've tried. But this is not the end of our story, as I had another game with him and the DM from the previous campaign as a player. He played a really cool lawful evil cleric, and the rogue was a rogue. The other DM was tougher and wasn't having any of Rogue's bullshit, so he behaved most of the time. He bursted a few times, but I can admit that that was my fault. I was playing a nasty character and often targeted the rogue specifically. Others mostly ignored him, so he clinged to the cleric. Problem is, that cleric had a lot of chemistry with my character, and we even had a romance at some point. That was not acceptable for the rogue, so he intervened in our roleplay from time to time, and even asked the DM to bash in a door behind which me and the cleric were having a, moment. Fighting to the death and then kissing, that is. The DM brushed him off. Later, there was a huge important moment for the campaign as a whole, and for me personally. My character had secretly been developing a plan to summon a demon, which she succeeded at doing. She retired as a PC and became a boss fight later, which is kinda cool. I was having a blast, role-playing my ass off, with even the cleric joining in and casting aside his god and pledging to the demon. Great stuff. Then the rogue decides to jump in to kill my character. The PvP isn't the problem here, as my character clearly was a threat, but man, the demon was right there. The demon killed the rogue in an instant, which he then rage quit, which he did frequently in both campaigns, by the way, and refused to make a new character, demanding that the DM brings him back as an evil spirit or something. He said several times that his goal would be to kill my character, and that would be it. Character death was a common thing in this campaign, and we all agreed that in our circumstance, resurrection was not an option, so people just rolled up new characters when they died. One player died like 3 times and was actually okay with it, but the rogue clearly was not. He said his character was really important to him and he didn't want to play anything else. Which brings us to the question, why would he agree to participate in a gruesome campaign like this one in the first place? Because his friend was there and apparently he wasn't allowed to play without the rogue. The reason that he wasn't kicked this time? The cleric. He was a great player and the DM didn't want to lose him, but he came as a package with the rogue, unfortunately. He even managed to convince the DM to resurrect the rogue somehow. He had some restrictions with the specifics of which I wasn't aware. But it didn't matter because he left the server after some argument about the Furry NSFW art with the owner. I called it! I knew it was too good to be true that we'd get a furry story that didn't get weird. So that was that. The rogue became a legend passed on to future generations of players in our Discord server. I left out a lot of things like clear main character syndrome, telling others how to play, how to be a real man, and snatching away the DM in the middle of the game to tell him how upset he was with us. But it seemed so small in the grand scheme of things. It also turned out the toxicity and abuse in the relationships with the DM was somewhat mutual, but it doesn't really matter. I heard from a player who was bullied relentlessly by the rogue in the first campaign, that they, as well as the DM, had finally broken free from him. Apparently, he demanded that the DM run like 5 games a week for him, and all of them fell apart. Even after all of that, he didn't change his perspective. and now he has lost everyone who was willing to tolerate him. I do have to thank the rogue for one thing. He made me value team play immensely. Also, I was kinda afraid of rogues, but I would go on to heal eventually. End of story. Well, when I'm right, I'm right. You really can't have a furry orbiting you without also having to stomach their unique brand of modern art, now can ya? Now, I don't want to hear any of you asking for DeviantArt deep dives from me anytime soon, because I think I would actually need to go to the hospital. And as an American, I am acutely aware that YouTube does not provide me with insurance. It sounds to me like this story pretty much wrapped up the way that we were expecting it to, with the sad and also kind of funny death of our antagonist. Damn, this was a rough situation to be in, OP. We've all had those friends who have other friends or partners that you just know are bad for them, but you got no idea how to broach the subject with the person without making yourself seem like the bad guy. I mean, come on, saying, "Hey bro, I don't like your friend" is one thing. But it's a whole different thing to be like, "Hey bro, I don't like that you are friends with your friend." That takes a lot of pretty delicate phrasing and a lot more social and emotional intelligence than someone like me could ever be capable of. Never mind the fact that you may end up just being wrong about the whole situation and you actually are just being a dick. But it sounds like OP was pretty spot on in their assessment of the rogue, and now they're living a happy life filled with plenty of dice rolling, now that the rogue has yiffed himself into the abyss. And on that happy note, we have a fan art submission this week. That's right, how about we take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake? This week's fan art comes from viewer Amber Moon Animation, who has made the first ever 3D animation to be featured in Gallery of the Drake. I've seen all sorts of styles and mediums show up in our little fan art showcase, but I can't say I ever expected VeggieTales to make an appearance.
Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe.
Thank you again, Amber Moon Animation, for submitting your art. They are available for commission, so if you want them to make you something like this, go ahead and find the link to their channel in the description. If you'd like to see your fan art featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. Fan art is my favorite part of doing YouTube, and it means the world to me that I can inspire artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you feel like supporting the channel further, my Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.